The purpose of the recording is just to help our minute taker. And Chloe, to be clear, you don't have to take great minutes on this part, um,
Okay.
but also to be able to share it with people in the future. Now, I think that I'm recording. Many of you may have gotten the notification just now. All right. During the course of this orientation, we're going to talk about the big picture, why we're here, what the Coordinating Council is gathered to do, the landscape and what happened around us to cause us to be here and what's happening at the state level. We'll talk about how our organization is structured and the rules that we follow for having our meetings and selecting members and how we stay organized as a group. We'll talk about our finances, the different funding sources that we utilize and may utilize in the future, and also an overview of a couple of the providers that we have in the region. I'll explain mobility management and my role and where that came from. And then finally, JB is going to talk about the Next Gen project, where we've been so far with that project and what we're going to do in the near future to move it forward. Our mission is to actively lead and engage the Monadnock region in building an innovative, coordinated, and resilient transportation network. We're going to talk first about Monadnock region and what that means, coordinated and what that means, and then transportation network and how we define that. So first, the Monadnock region. We represent all of the towns in the southeast part of the state of New Hampshire. Some of these towns are not in Cheshire County. We span county lines. And some of them are not within the traditional DHHS regions that many of us know through social services. The DHHS Region 5 is not the same thing as Region 5 for transportation. However, it does have almost entire overlap. The transportation regions are created by centricity around major services. So the Region 5 transportation region is generally around the hospitals that exist in the area and the things that people would most often want to travel to. Coordination. We're here to make sure that we can all gather as masterminds in a single working place. We want to be able to share ideas and solve problems and foster mutual success of the organizations while keeping track of what's going on with one another so that we're not overlapping too much. Being able to recognize when one thing connects with another thing and we can make a better alliance in helping one another out and finding synergies. We want to know who's out there to call when we have a specific problem, when to call them. And also we want to make sure that if we're doing work to fill in the gaps, we're not doing work that's already being done by someone else. This group generally works upstream. Who's heard the upstream story before? It's an analogy. Okay, so the way that I've heard it, and it's told lots of different ways, but there are folks on the side of a river and they're noticing that there are babies floating down the stream. And people are frantic pulling babies out of the stream one by one. It's hard work and they're all trying to stay on top of it. But one person disappears from the group and is missing for some time. Um, that person comes back after a while and the babies have stopped floating down the stream. And people, of course, were irritated because the person who disappeared and was not working actively with them wasn't there for a time. But they asked what happened, what changed, and why aren't there babies floating down the stream any longer? It turns out this person has gone upstream to solve the root cause problem, which was that there was a hole in the bridge and babies were falling through the bridge. Again, that's told in different ways, but there was a problem upstream and this person went to fix it. And therefore, the work that that one person did in the absence of all of the struggle on the ground was beneficial for everyone solving the root cause problem. And that's the idea of what we want to do here in this group. The problems that we want to solve are not for one person, one ride. However, that one person and one ride might be a good use case for what's happening broadly the same thing is happening to lots and lots of people, like in a class action lawsuit. Those lawsuits only get filed if the same thing is happening to lots and lots of people at the same time. We want to make sure that we're moving the needle on real issues and recognizing things that are high level and broad so that we can get at them from the root. Transportation cuts across all realms. It transcends all of our organizations, all of the boundaries impacting all of our systems. Transportation is the one thing that unifies all of us. And in our region, transportation is also one thing that is not as unifying as we would like it to be. So we're here to solve some of those problems and help people in our region to move around. Community transportation is defined as localized, flexible, and often nonprofit or volunteer-driven mobility services designed to fill gaps in traditional public transit. So in large cities, that traditional public transit is the bus system or the subway system. In our region, we have volunteer driver programs. There are one fixed route service that exists in our region, but in other regions, there are maybe multiple. There are demand responsive units, options like paratransit, some shuttles, microtransit, micromobility options like e-bikes and scooters might also fall into community transportation. But just remembering that community transportation is not public transportation, it's the other things that fill in the gaps. So that's what our mission statement is all about. Any questions so far? All right. The reason that regional coordinating councils exist is because it was written into law long ago. Originally, RSA 239B was written in 2007, and the state coordinating council that it was about was formed in 2010. The state coordinating council is tasked with developing, implementing, and providing guidance for the coordination of community transportation options within New Hampshire so that the general public, in particular citizens in need of access to essential services and activities, can access local and regional transportation services, and municipalities, human services agencies, and other organizations can purchase shared ride coordinated transportation services for their citizens, clients, and customers. SCC creates policies for community transportation, establishes community transportation regions, encourages the development of regional coordinating councils, assists in other regional efforts as needed, and monitors the results of statewide coordination. They will approve the formation of regional coordinating councils and the selection of regional transportation coordinators according to the criteria that they set. And they'll also solicit and accept donations for funding so that they can implement all of the ideas that come about. All right, and Fred Butler from DOT is joining us right now. So he's here just in time. I'll tell you that Fred Butler sits on SCC. And so if I'm saying anything right here that's not true, he'll correct me, and we'll be glad for that because we'll get it fixed for next time. All right, so it does say here SCC is going to establish the regional coordinating councils. The law says very few things about the RCCs, but it does say that they're hereby established, representing regions that are defined by the SCC. The designation as an RCC must be approved by the SCC. Members of RCC shall be immune from liability in executing the duties of the council. That means you can't be sued for anything that we do here or any decisions that we make here. We facilitate the implementation of coordinated community transportation in the region, encourage the development of improved and expanded regional community transportation services, and we advise SCC on the status of what's going on in our region. So this is why we have the mission statement that we do. It ties back to facilitating the implementation of coordinated community transportation here. The State Coordinating Council has a website that was launched in 2024. We talked earlier this morning about Keep New Hampshire Moving. This Keep New Hampshire Moving website is like all things transportation for the state of New Hampshire. There are lots of things that you can do here on the website. Finding transportation is just among the few. Ways to travel. if you click on any of these services, you may be able to find a way to travel by way of some of these services in our region, and also it defines what the service is. What I look at most often is regions. So SCC set the regions. It was one of their very first tasks, and we now are Region 5. So if you hover over the regions here, you can see which area it represents. We are Cheshire-Monadnock region. And there's lots of good information here, resources about the projects that we're working on, information on our coordinating council. This should always be, for the most part, up to date. Regional projects, how you can get involved in the projects and in our council. And then there's also something about me, the mobility manager. So that's what you'll find on the State Coordinating Council website, which is called Keep New Hampshire Moving. Under About Us, it gives a lot of the information about SCC that I'm going to describe in the next couple of slides.
Hey, Lisa, can I
Yeah, sure.
interject one more time?
Yeah.
I think one thing to keep in mind for everybody that's listening in right now, if there's an opportunity on your own websites to incorporate this website that Lisa was just showing, I think it would be a wonderful act of coordination in the MRCC. Our goal is to try to make it easy as possible for people needing rides in our region to figure out how to get those rides. So even though they might have relationships with your organizations, direct relationships, you might occasionally have somebody that can't be served by your organization, in which case this is a wonderful resource to direct them to. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Fred, I was just saying that you might jump in and interrupt me if I say anything that's a little off base here. So please feel free to do that. So the State Coordinating Council was created as a unifying body after years of advocacy by organizations throughout the state, to make sure that some real attention could be paid to transportation issues in the state of New Hampshire. As I mentioned, they formed regions in the beginning, and we are Region 5 down here in the corner. You'll see that there are 8 regions, and 2 of them, Regions 6 and 9, have merged with other regions. In the beginning, we were Regions 6 and 5, and we came together. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Members of the SCC are officials that come with all different perspectives from Department of Health and Human Services, DOT, that's Department of Transportation, Department of Education, Governor's Commission on Disability, Transit Association, the Regional Planning Commissions, one of which is SWRPC, philanthropic organizations, and 8 representatives from transportation providers. Statewide organizations currently participating are GSIL, Easter Seals. I believe AARP is still there as well right now. There are 2 things that we really need to know about SCC at this point in time. And the first is that they've just adopted their strategic goals. And we've talked about the strategic goals in our last couple of meetings, really focusing in on goal number 2, which is elevating equity and lived experience in decision making. In that goal, they're hoping to have somebody who has lived experience in needing transportation to be sitting on each of the regional coordinating councils. The first goal is creating feedback loops. The first meeting in an effort to create feedback loops happened on December 15th. That was where SCC pulled together the chairpersons of all the regional coordinating councils and started to talk about ideas and topics that were common to everyone and to share best practices. The third goal is modernize data and finance systems to support braided funding. They're looking for at least one organization that they can support in creating similar data sets for each of the federal funding sources to make sure that when an organization receives federal funding, they don't have to report X set of numbers to Department of Health and Human Services and X set of numbers to Department of Transportation and X set of numbers to the environmental services agencies. Just one set of numbers that they're collecting and reporting to all of the funding sources. Lead statewide community transportation coordination across plans and partners. That's goal number 4. And that will show itself in a coordinated human services transportation plan. And goal number 5 is to strengthen public communications and awareness around SCC, around community transportation, around the regional coordinating councils, and around the goals of the mobility management network. The other big thing that's been happening with the SCC is that they've recently partnered with the Commission on Aging to complete a community transportation needs assessment. That's the survey that that we looked at just a meeting or two ago. They've recently come out with some of the high-level findings from that community needs assessment survey. They had 2,800 responses that were collected all of last year. Lots of people who are over 65 and have disabilities, and many veterans were answering the surveys so that they were heavily represented in the results of the survey. And that was by design because they were trying to target populations and hear from people who are underrepresented. The final recommendations are going to be delivered in April of 2026. But some of the early findings are that transportation exists on paper, but it's unreliable in practice. This is statewide. Missed or delayed medical care is common. Eligibility rules and provider policies create friction. Families and coordinators are filling system gaps. That means coordinators are driving people around when they shouldn't have to. Jolene, I see you shaking your head because I know that happens at MFS. Rural barriers stack up quickly. Transportation is tightly tied with health and independence. So we will talk more about that as well, because we know that one of our goals is to help to smooth over some of these situations throughout the state and particularly in our region. All right, so RCC was MRCC was 2 councils in the beginning. So when SCC set out to establish its transportation regions, in the beginning, there was Cheshire County Regional Coordinating Council, and then the Eastern Monadnock Coordinating Council. That was the eastern side here, Antrim, Peterborough, Jaffrey, New Ipswich, and these on the eastern side. It made sense for the groups to merge and work on similar issues. So regions 5 and 6 became region 5 alone. In the very beginning, in 2010, we had the American Red Cross Rural Rides Program, City Express, and CVTC. Now there are lots of options in the region. I wanted to share with you the earliest contact list, which I felt was sort of interesting. You'll notice here on this list, many of the same organizations, HCS, and Monadnock at Home and Monadnock Adult Care Center. MDS, we have also, let's see, Thomas Transportation, CVTC, Cheshire County, all similar organizations that are still participating. However, there is only one member who was there in the beginning, and that's Frank. So Frank is the only guy who really knows what this felt like to be here in 2010. I found an early article that I've linked here, and this was written in the Keene Sentinel. This article quoted J.B. Mack in talking about public transportation options way back when. And so I'm going to send to you guys a link to this article. It's just interesting to see how things have changed and where we have moved forward and areas where we're still struggling to make ground. Our organization is governed by bylaws. That's our set of rules, sort of like our constitution. The bylaws are linked here. Um, they look like this. So it's sort of a heavy document with lots of language that we don't really have to understand word for word, but the general gist of it is these are the rules that we follow. They tell us who our members are and what we do. Um, so the bylaws will establish our name, what our region is, our vision, our mission, and our guiding principles. Someone asked about those earlier. What we do, so the duties of the coordinating council and the duties of the lead agency. It'll tell us who should be a member, who are we targeting for members, and when we need to disclose conflicts of interest among those members. It tells us when we make elections, how often and what the term limits are. There are no term limits for people serving on the coordinating council. However, there are term limits for the leadership officers and executive committee. They have term limits of 2 years. There are certain ex officio members that participate in our coordinating council. Those are representatives from statewide mobility management and also Department of Transportation, and staff members that participate from Southwest Region Community Services. The bylaws tell us how to which officers we need to have. So right now, Frank Dubisky from Thomas Transportation is the chair. Vice chair is Charles Pratt, Charlie from HCS. Our secretary is Erica Alusik Bingham from Southern New Hampshire Services. Erica, I actually think that the name of your company, CAP, has changed. We'll fix that, but I do want to say thank you for stepping up as secretary. We appreciate that. And the treasurer of the organization is always the lead agency. So lead agency, that the direct recipient of funds is Cheshire County. So that's the reason that we have Jennifer Robinson from Cheshire County Grants Department acting as our secretary. She represents lead agency at this time. However, lead agency is actually Southwest Region Planning Commission partnering with Cheshire County, but it's always necessary for somebody handling the funds directly as a recipient to be in the treasurer position. Our committees are established in the bylaws. There's only one committee that's always there. That's the executive committee. Other committees are, we might have a governance committee, which does the care and feeding and just overseeing of the organization, making sure that we're following our bylaws and that the bylaws say what we want them to, and making sure that we're meeting when we should. It's just basically the human resources department of MRCC. That committee doesn't exist right now, but it could at some point in the future. And if it did, our bylaws say what their responsibilities will be. We do also have a grants subcommittee right now that's looking for alternative funding sources. Making amendments to the bylaws calls for a supermajority, and supermajority means 2/3. So a simple majority when we're voting is always 1/2. Supermajority would have to be 2/3. So at least 2/3 of the people participating in the vote would have to vote in favor for us to make any changes to bylaws. Meetings, this is a little more complicated, so it gets in its entire separate page. We have regular meetings, no less than 4 times per year, but we have special meetings if they need to be called on a single topic, a specific topic. And right now we're sitting in an emergency meeting, which is a regular meeting, but it's called an emergency meeting because there was something that we needed to deal with quickly, and we couldn't practically do that by meeting in person this morning because of certain barriers, that today being the weather. In our meetings, you may hear, you may notice there are certain rules of order that we follow. Those are Robert's rules, and Robert's rules are used in legislature, in school boards, and lots of boards and committees for all kinds of reasons, just to delineate this is how we act when we're in meetings. We all have an agreement that this is how it flows. This is how we do voting. This is what our quorum is. How do we debate the topics that we're talking about? And in meetings that are following Robert's Rules of Order, um, the voting will typically take place after a motion is made and a second is made. And then there's discussion. It's motion, a second, and then a discussion. And in that discussion, we're raising our hands and taking turns when we're called upon by the chair. So typically the chair is watching for people to raise their hands and share their point, and then move on to the next person. So not everyone's point is going to get a response. However, everyone gets to speak and say what it is that they want to share. And sometimes there's going to be back and forth discussion, but that's at the chair's discretion. So Frank will be calling on people to participate in the meetings in an orderly way because we're following Robert's Rules of Order. But also we fall under RSA 91A, which is New Hampshire's right to know law. The right to know law exists because people in the state of New Hampshire who are in the public have a right to know what's going on in the public meetings that are impacting them and their tax dollars and their livelihood in their communities. This is something that the state of New Hampshire really, really believes in. So the right to know law says that if we're going to have meetings, we have to post them ahead of time so people know where it's going to happen and how to get there, when to show up, and in what format. We have to hold proper meetings, following Robert's Rules of Order and making sure that those meetings have votes that are recorded in minutes, and also that the meetings are just taking place following a certain structure. We have to allow the public to access the meetings. That means that the meetings have to be held in accessible locations, or if there is an online meeting, that public link has to be made available for anyone to come and watch. When we take minutes of our meetings, those minutes have to record who voted on what the motion was, who the second maker was, the exact wording of the motion, and also any discussion that took place that may be just briefly outlining what discussion was. And also the minutes have to record who was there, who was taking the minutes also. And also it has to say the name and title of the person taking the minutes is now a new requirement under the right to know law. We have to maintain records, that being our minutes, sometimes our agendas, any documents that are circulated publicly among the members, anything that might impact our decision making. Those are all public documents, and the public can make a right to know request to see those documents in the future. So we have to make sure that we keep them in a place where we can get back to them later and provide them to the public in a timely manner, if those documents are requested. There are some exceptions to activities that would not have to take place in public. So we're allowed to have non-public sessions or closed sessions on specific things like human resources, anything that involves emergency operations or might be harmful for the general public to know about, contract negotiations. It might be something that would harm the reputation of someone other than a member of the body. So if we were talking about somebody else, and it was like a human resources thing or a member, and we didn't want those discussions to happen in public, then we could move into non-public session for that. We can also do non-public for any kind of legal advice that we're receiving. So there are certain reasons why we can go into non-public session. And that's all is described in RSA 91A, the right to know law. I'm sure you all want to see how the right to know law looks. So here we go. This is just a memo on the right to know law. As of March 14th, 2024, this is outlining what does the right to know law really mean in plain English, and it interprets it. This is the most recent interpretation of what our Attorney General believes the right to know law means. And you'll have access to all of that if you want to be right to know law nerds and learn more. But you'll hear us talk about that and why we do certain things the way that we do. You heard me say this morning that because we have online participation, we have to do roll call vote. That's in the law. RSA 91A is the reason that we do that. All right. So some of the things that MRCC may be asked to do or has been asked to do in the past are to manage funds and approve expenditures, to write letters of recommendation for certain expenditures, even if we don't oversee the money ourselves, to become informed and educate other people about community transportation, about our group, and about mobility management, to promote community transportation, to write a work plan for the mobility manager. That's me, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. Plan for the future and approve the coordinated transportation plan, which was done just recently. So right now, our current roster is we're going to get Christy added to this, and I want to say we're 15 people strong. No, 16 now. So if anybody wants a copy of this roster and you don't know how to go back to an old meeting packet and get to it, I'm happy to email it to you. This is information that we can all share so we know how to reach one another. I had mentioned before that there are certain ex officio members. Fred Butler, Terry Palmer will be changed to the new statewide mobility manager. And Chuck Saya, from the Governor's Commission on Disability is another statewide coordinating council representative that stays in tune with the work that we're doing here. Staff support, that's me, Lisa. Chloe is here, and Chloe introduced herself. She's taking minutes this morning. And JB Mack is here to support us in certain aspects of this orientation, but also he brings a lot of historical knowledge and may sit in on meetings from time to time. I mentioned earlier a MOU and a conflict of interest statement. These are the things that I had said were filled out by Christy. The MOU is required of all new members. And it states, I understand what MRCC is here to do, and I agree to participate in that. And I'll designate an alternate if I'm not able to make it to the meetings in person. And the conflict of interest statement. Conflict of interest statement will have us list all of the organizations and the conflicts of interest that might exist for us. So if we have a loyalty to a different organization, we'll want to disclose that so that, for the good of the public, because it's required, and also for the good of other members so that we're aware of when somebody abstains from a vote. Meaning that they don't want to participate in discussion or they don't want to share their opinion on a particular vote, that they might have a conflict of interest or a real reason why they're not doing that.
Lisa, I'll just add that one of the things that all members should keep in mind is that occasionally we have to talk about allocating funds to a specific organization. And so it's really important to just keep in mind if your agency is part of that discussion of evaluating whether funding you should get funding or not, or making a motion that your agency will receive funding, that you really need to abstain from that vote, recuse yourself from that vote. And there's a handful of us that are voting members that also receive 5310 funding, the one major type of funding that we're receiving today at the MRCC.
And you may
Frank
remember,
and Lisa will try to keep track of that as well, but just people should know, just try to keep that in mind when you're attending meetings.
Thank you. You may also remember that late in the summer, there was a vote on transferring funds from mobility management to regional mobility manager. I knew at that time that I was going to apply for the position or had applied for the position. So I abstained from that vote because at that time I had a conflict of interest and I could recognize that.
Yep.
All right. Finances. So our finances are handled on a fiscal year of July 1st through June 30th. Most of our grants come from from FTA. That's not the Federal Transit Authority. It's the Federal Transit Administration. I apologize. And the funding is distributed through the Department of Transportation. So FTA, the federal government, sends money to the state of New Hampshire. It's filtered through DOT to recipients, and our direct recipient in this area is Cheshire County. It's Cheshire County's responsibility to make sure that we're collecting all of the proper documentation to get paid back for any expenses that we have in this region. We do that by all of our sub-recipients, those being CVTC, the Keene Senior Center, and also HCS and Southwest Region Planning Commission. We all come up with invoices and backup documentation to say, here's the work that we did. This is what we want to be reimbursed for. And we call those RFRs, or requests for reimbursement. Those are all collected by Cheshire County and sent to DOT to support documentation for all of the work that we've done. Let's see, the Cheshire County always acts as treasurer or bookkeeper for us. They might propose budgets. They get an idea of how much money is going to be coming into the organization, and to help us figure out how that money can be allocated to the different providers and programs that we're supporting. If we're spending too quickly or too slowly in a particular line item, they might flag that and say, we need to look at this and maybe do a line item transfer. And also they document local matches. Federal funds that come to us, they come with a requirement to match some of their federal dollars with local money. Most of our local match is done through volunteer hours through the CVTC Volunteer Driver Program. Correct me if I'm wrong, JB or Fred, but our local match is 20%, I believe. So Cheshire County is helping us to document that we've met that threshold. Fred, I see you are about to say something.
Yes, yeah, a little bit in the weeds. It is 20%, but the volunteer drivers from CBTC help you leverage that 20% in the form of the volunteer driver time is considered in-kind match. So it's effectively 100% based on when you include the volunteer driver's time. Again, that allows you to leverage the extra 20% of federal funds. So that's a crucial component.
Okay.
Is the volunteers.
Yeah, I'd like to say one thing too. I just want to call out CVTC and Alan Gillis. It's not documenting in-kind match is not the most fun thing to do, as I understand it, and it takes a good tracking system. And Alan has stepped up to the plate, like Ellen Avery before him, to do that on behalf of the MRCC. And it's really invaluable to us because coming up with cash match is always a very difficult thing to do.
So FTA sends money to the states, and our New Hampshire Department of Transportation is administering money that comes from the federal government. They have a direct recipient, that's Cheshire County, and then Cheshire County has a couple of sub-recipients. Those are the entities that contract with Cheshire County. The four that I mentioned, CVTC, HCS, the Keene Senior Center, and also SWRPC. So that's what you'll see reflected in our finances, and we will open up this month's finances in just a minute. Our funding sources are the FTA Section 5310 program for enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. We don't get exactly the same amount of money every year, but in 2026, it's $312,000, and those are the funds that we distribute and oversee. This money can't be spent on anything that replaces Medicaid or ADA paratransit services. And it also has to provide services for ambulatory walking and also accessible transportation. In the past, this group has also overseen money that came from Department of Health and Human Services through CDC, Centers for Disease Control, Health Equity Grant. We called it Transportation Equity, and those were in the COVID years when the goal of the grant was to make sure that people who were impacted by COVID were equitably served by transportation services in our region. We got that money in 2022 and in 2023, and that program wrapped up in June of 2024. So not so long ago that some of us may remember overseeing some of those funds. Some of the
Can I
go ahead.
interject one more time, Lisa, on the last slide? I just wanted to also, for those of you that are new, there's latent demand in our region for transportation, and the DHHS funding, the CDC funding proved that. We actually ended up doubling ridership for a lot of the rides that we provide as the MRCC during that period. Unfortunately, it was just a shot in the arm, and it's gone now. But that's the one thing about community transportation that's so important, I think, is that having consistency in service is really important for the people that depend on it. And having funding go up and down, I think one of the goals for the MRCC is to have like a steady revenue to keep the level of service there for people that depend on this type of transportation.
Thank you. Some of the less relevant FTA grant programs that we might just hear about in passing, just recognize that this is what they mean, although we might not be directly handling them. The 5310E, however, statewide transportation planning and research, our region does receive some of those funds because that's what's supporting us in hiring that consultant for the Next Gen program and has helped us in the past with some of the other research and preparation for Next Gen. 5310 capital program, that's for vehicles and equipment. We talked about this morning when we approved the funding for Monadnock Adult Care Center. 5311 is for rural transit. 5311 funds go directly to HCS for City Express. The direct recipient, remember I said that federal government gives it to DOT, which has direct recipients, and in this case, the direct recipient of 5311 funds in our area are going to HCS to support City Express. And right now, we don't manage those funds, but we're going to talk more about those funds in the future because they do impact what we're doing with Next Gen. 5311F is intercity bus. So it's transit that goes from city to city, not within a certain certain urban district. 5307 is funding for buses and subways and things like that in an urban area. There are very few urban areas in the state of New Hampshire. And then 5339 supports the buses and the bus facilities, primarily in those urban areas that are receiving 5307 funds. Did I get all of that right? Anyone want to add anything? All right. So other sources of revenue that we may talk about or work on are braided funding. That means bringing in other federal grants that can play nicely with the FTA funds that we're getting right now. Other federal grants can come from Department of Health and Human Services or from justice programs, or they might come from substance misuse programs and recovery, things like that. There are lots of other federal grants that come into the Monadnock region that have provisions that say some of this money can be spent on transportation because we care about it too. So we're going to be looking for ways to braid in some of those funding sources to help us support transportation. There are non-governmental grants, foundations, things like Point 32, which I spoke about last month's subcommittee report, and then AARP, which I talked about in this month's grants subcommittee report. Those are places where we're going to outside foundations to look for ways to support the work that we're doing. And then also there are local contributions. Those local contributions might come from organizations in the region. They might come from taxation, but other local contributions coming in from municipalities in the county. All right. So we fund two major pots, mobility management and provider operations. Mobility management became a thing just a couple of years ago. I want to say 2020. Oh, it says here, Terry Johnson was hired as the first mobility manager in 2021. He had been working for SWRPC for a long time before that. He had been supporting MRCC as a staff member for quite a while before that. But in 2021, the Mobility Management Network was established in the state of New Hampshire, and he became the first mobility manager. He served in that role until he retired just a couple of months ago, and then that's where I came in. I'm the second mobility manager. Provider operations, that's the Keene Senior Center, CBTC, and HCS. And right now, Kim, do you want to tell us a little, like 3 or 4 minutes about what your program is and why we support it?
Yes, our program provides rides to people who are no longer able to drive. Um, we have a core of about 22 volunteer drivers, and we have a couple of volunteers who've been trained to go to a person's home and see if we can meet their need. We can't, for instance, take somebody who needs to be lifted or moved in that way. And if somebody needs a wheelchair, we have to be sure that a service provider can actually handle that. We prefer not to have somebody that needs a wheelchair, because not every volunteer driver can lift a wheelchair and put it in their car. We also provide services in people's homes if they need help with changing light bulbs or flipping a mattress or things like that. We also provide grocery shopping. Like if they don't want to go to the grocery store, a member can have one of our volunteers go to the grocery store for them. We've seen the miles go up from around 13,000 miles of travel in 2024 up to 17,000 in 2025.
Thank you. Alan, can you tell us a little bit about CBTC and what we support for you?
Yeah, so very similar to Keene Senior, we provide no charge rides to people to go grocery shopping, go to their doctor's appointments, post office, the pharmacy. If they need to go file paperwork to join Medicaid, we provide agency rides. And our rides go anywhere they need to go. So we take clients to Boston. We take them to most of the major hospitals around here. We bring them up to Lebanon. The biggest increase for us has been the oncology and dialysis, which take up a lot of rides. And we're finding that our biggest challenge is filling those.
Okay, Charlie was with us earlier in the meeting and he had to drop off, but I'll share that for HCS, we support the Friendly Bus program. The Friendly Bus program is the on-demand service for people who need accessible rides, and also folks who are over 65 years old or have a walking disability or something that causes them to not be able to get to a regular City Express bus stop. And that's door to door. So they can call the Friendly Bus ahead of time and it will go and pick them up wherever they are, as long as it's within a certain distance from the regular City Express route. And those are the white buses. And we also have the red buses, City Express in Keene. and the red buses run on a loop, one going clockwise and one going counterclockwise, and they hit places like Cheshire Medical Center, some of the Keene housing units, and Walmart and Hannaford, and it takes about 1 hour for the City Express to go from the beginning all the way around the loop back to the beginning. And again, that's two routes running in opposite directions. And the one place where they meet at about the same time and exchanges can be made is at Walmart. We can ask Charlie a little bit more about that too, if we want to learn more in the future.
We also support, Charlie has a weekly trip up to Lebanon and the Veterans Hospital up in White River Junction.
That's right. And that's called medical rides. That's also outlined on his website as well.
And one thing we're able to do as well is we have our volunteer drivers sometimes go with the person to their appointment, like at White River Junction or DH. So if they need help finding their physician or something like that, they'll actually go with them to the appointment.
All right. So now we're going to look at this month's financials. And this is what we're going to see every month in our traditional treasurer's report. Our simplified budget says here that we're paying HCS, we're paying CVTC for their volunteer driver program. There's a little bit of money set aside for accessible rides, $1,000. Typically, that $1,000 is used to hire out to Scott Simons and Smart Ride to provide wheelchair rides. And then CVTC also has transportation coordinators or staff that work in their office. The Keene Senior Center has the program that was just described by Kim. SWRPC provides regional mobility management and the mobility manager itself. JB, do you want to take a quick stab at explaining the difference between the two?
Well, I think it's mostly just the result of the state's preference to have a basically the local match that's available that we discussed before. Yeah, you can use volunteer credits for one of them, and the other one we have to use a different local match. And basically, I think the State Coordinating Council and New Hampshire DOT want to make sure that you have a specific somebody who's what they do is mobility management. So Chloe and I provide some support to Lisa, and that's what the supportive mobility management services are.
And then there's county indirect, which means sort of overhead for the county and paying for the work that they do to support us and being our bookkeepers, so to speak, and doing other work for us. So total budget is $312,000. In quarter 3, 68,000 was spent. Quarter 4, 75,000, and then total expenditure so far is $144,000 for the year. So that means our balance to spend from now until June 30th is $168,000 plus or minus. And our treasurer will tell us if we're spending too fast or too slowly on any of these lines, or we need to rethink what we've allocated in our budget for those lines. So this is the important box right here, the peach colored one. Certain notes about where some of the money is flowing in and out. We do have a small contract with Region 8 to serve Ware and New Boston. So that means the region next to us is paying us a little bit of money because CVTC is driving in their region and going across the boundary a little bit. The next page is always going to be specific lines. You can look at this as much as you like, but it's going to tell you these are specific invoices and activities that we've paid for. And we are reporting on certain metrics. I'll just go through this now since we're in the file, and we'll talk about the metrics a little bit more later. There are certain things that we have to record to show the success of the program. And one of those things is the number of trips that are provided. So how many people are traveling. Another is the purpose of those trips, mostly medical and social or family trips. And this reporting is done by CVTC and HCS and by Keene Senior Center. They turn in all of these numbers. So the money doesn't come without strings, right? Am I right, guys? It's a little bit of work, right? All right. And also, we're recording denials. So why is it that people couldn't get a ride? And this is really important too, because we want to document that there's a gap. There are people out there that want to go places and they can't. They haven't been able to. So we need to work on making these numbers as accurate as possible so we're capturing all of the need in our region. Reasons for denials. This report doesn't reflect it, but we see that pretty often there's somebody who wants to go for a ride on CVTC and they had Medicaid. So CVTC had to say, well, you've got Medicaid, non-emergency medical transportation. You really need to do that because that's your option number one. Or driver unavailability is another one. Somebody requests a ride and it gets down to the wire within 48 hours and nobody has picked up the ride yet. So they have to let the person know that we may not be able to fulfill your request. Alan, thank you. I'm glad that you're jumping in.
Yeah, I do have a question because we've been getting a lot of kickback for people with a Medicaid spend down, saying that I have Medicaid, but I have a spend down, so you should take me because of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Can we table that? It's a really good topic, and I want to make sure that we get impact from Fred and others, and maybe bring in somebody from Medicaid to help us get into the weeds on that. Is that okay, Alan?
Yep, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put it on a future agenda. All right. And another thing that we track is referrals. So who is sending people to us asking for rides? And how often is that happening? I get referrals from other mobility managers pretty often. And sometimes I'll hear from somebody who is at a social services agency saying, I've got this particular person with a problem and we've gotten lots of denials and we just can't crack the nut. So I count those as referrals and I report those in, and also I'm receiving reports from the other providers in the area. All right, again, more referrals. And the last page, again, is a schedule of deliverables or things that we're going to have to report on in the near future. So that's what we're going to see in our financial packet every month. If there's anything particular on that we want to talk about more, we can do that when Suzanne Bansley is here or when Jen Robinson is back. Suzanne was sorry that she couldn't join us this morning, but if this is something that needs more explanation, she's happy to do that for us. All right, so current system in our region has lots of providers that are getting paid through 5310 funds and providers that are not getting paid through 5310 funds, but they exist out there. Some of them are Future Insight provides a volunteer driver program like CVTC that is for people with low vision. There's Cheshire Village at Home, which is that piece of the Keene Senior Center that Kim just described. But also there's Monadnock at Home, which is a village program very, very similar to Cheshire Village at Home that exists over in the eastern part of the region. There are demand response like Friendly Bus, paratransit, and also medical rides through HCS. Medical transportation, NEMT, if you hear that, that stands for non-emergency medical transportation, most often provided by Medicaid to help people get to appointments. So if Medicaid is paying for the eye doctor, you have a right to get transportation funded to get to the eye doctor and to get back home. Lots of people are using friends and family reimbursement, and some people are using companies like Safe Travel Transportation. You met Eamon when he came to our meeting last month. Adventure Limousine is another provider of non-emergency medical transportation services in the area. And Smart Ride provides accessible NEMT rides, and Smart Ride is the only and largest provider in our region, and frankly, the best in the state from what I hear. And then we've got our fixed route.
Lisa,
Yeah.
just that a Smart Ride is represented here by Scott. I mean,
Yes, it
it's
is.
important to know that.
Scott, did you want to say anything?
I wonder if Scott left.
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
Okay. Um, we also have a fixed route service, the City Express, which I just described. We talked about the performance indicators. We're counting number of trips, purpose of those trips, denials, and referrals.
There are a few other providers out there too. It's not a complete list. The Mover does, some work on the Vermont fringes of our area. There's taxi companies. There's many people in this meeting, I think, that provide transportation for your clients sometimes that aren't listed. So it's just it's a difficult thing to track. That's why it's so important for this to coordinate.
Yeah, and in the future, I'll make sure that these are just certain components, or some of the components, some not all. Some state level concepts that we may talk about, especially when we're focusing on finances, are the 10-year plan. So the 10-year plan is the Department of Transportation planning for its activities over the next 10 years. And that plan is reviewed every 2 years. And when it's reviewed, it has to go through the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation. We call it GASIT. So if you remember a couple of months ago, we were saying you're all invited to the GASIT hearings. That's what this is. The state was putting together and proposing its 10-year plan, and GASIT was hearing what people had to say about that plan that they were proposing. So it's for all of the things that DOT oversees, roads and bridges, turnpikes and rail, and even air. And transit is this piece right here, the $43.3 million, 10% in transit. So we're just a small piece of the GASIT process. Right now, the final draft is sitting in the governor's office for review, and when the governor signs off on it, it'll go to the full House of Representatives for a vote. And we think that it will be called, what is it, JBHB
2026.
2026. Right, so it gets voted on like any other piece of legislation. If you ever want to know more about the 10-year plan, I'll show you where to find, well, in fact, when you get a copy of this presentation, you can click right on this guy here and learn more about the 10-year plan. It's all here.
Can I say a few things about the 10-year plan? I'll try to make it really quick, so the 10-year plan is like capital, how they're going to pay for all this transportation in 10 years, all those different pieces, all those modes. And I think a really important piece to recognize about the transit, although it's 10% of the plan, it's almost entirely federal dollars that are funding our system today. And you may have heard at previous meetings, MRCC, the state has become a little bit more generous over the years, but we don't get a lot of support from the state of New Hampshire. And so our transit systems are driven typically by federal dollars and local match dollars, meaning municipalities or however you round up that money. So that's a part of the 10-year plan that if you're going to hearings and talking, I think it's important to understand that that's what's going on in our state, and it's very different from other states in the region. I think it's most of the rural states in the union, a lot of them are like New Hampshire, where there's not a lot of state investment, but we're among the lowest of the 50 states. I think it's like 47th or something, the last assessment of that kind.
We've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to spend 5 minutes on mobility management, and then JB will spend 5 minutes on next gen, and we'll wrap up. So in layman's terms, mobility management is an innovative approach for managing and delivering coordinated transportation services to customers. So it's the person who's kind of like the social worker for transportation. And FTA says that this person and mobility management, the concept in general, is short-range planning and management activities for projects and coordination for transportation and transportation services providers. So there are lots of definitions for mobility management, but it's a thing that became a reality in the state of New Hampshire in 2010. Actually, I'm wrong about that. Mobility management came after the SCC. They spent years trying to bring it into the state. And as I mentioned, Terry was hired as our first mobility manager in this region in 2021. That's when the Mobility Management Network was created. So the scope of work is connecting people to transportation that they need to get to their destinations, and working across sectors with all of the partners to understand transportation needs, which is exactly what we're doing right here, right now in this group, to create new services that respond to needs. There are 8 mobility managers, one for each of the 8 regions. We're Region 5. This is me. The Mobility Management Network, overseen by the State Coordinating Council, and the State Coordinating Council filters down to the regional coordinating councils, which are shepherded by lead agencies. In our case, that's SWRPC. And the lead agencies then work with transportation providers. On the side is New Hampshire Department of Transportation, which hires the statewide mobility manager. That's Terry Palmer, and the position that's open right this second. And then the regional mobility managers don't exactly report to the statewide mobility manager, but meet regularly with other mobility managers to make sure that everyone's goals are in alignment and we're sharing best practices. So my employer is SWRPC, and my work plan is written by the Regional Coordinating Council. That's all of you. And I'm responsible for making sure that the goals that I have and that we as a group have align with what's going on at the state level with mobility management. We partner together by you all are writing my work plan, the things that I do day to day. I provide staff support to you, and we identify other people who should be attending MRCC, and you guys help me to get invitations to meet new people and appear in new places to explain what mobility management and community transportation are. My work plan is available to everyone, and it was recently approved in August. My objectives revolve around regional service delivery, which focuses on the customers, the riders; regional coordination, which focuses on the providers, all of the, that's the people who are doing the driving and transportation provision. Capacity building is looking at the system, and statewide planning is connecting to all of the other regions throughout the state and meeting with the statewide mobility manager. So right now in my day-to-day, I'm out building relationships and learning and educating, lots and lots of meetings that you can see on my activity tracker. I update Keep New Hampshire Moving in our regional space on the website. I support you all. And also I have a role in the statewide transportation equity task force, which focuses on making sure that transportation is available to folks with disabilities throughout the state. Lastly, I help out with the Next Gen project, and that's where I turn it over to JB.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. I'll try to be concise here. So the Next Generation Transit Project, the name came about because we're trying to reimagine transportation service here. A lot of you, many of you are new, but many of you are probably familiar with the coordinated plan, which I would call your Bible for like your long-term plan. That if you haven't already looked at the coordinated plan, that outlines all the priorities that your group has identified as important to the region. And what the Next Generation Transit Project is trying to do is trying to tick off some boxes about priorities that are listed in there. So one of the things is just one of the things you'll see in the coordinated plan is that we have complete coverage in thanks to CBTC in our region, but it's spotty. One of the things that we've found over the years is that we've learned from the data that Lisa was sharing earlier is that about 10% of the rides on average that CVTC is providing are unmet need, meaning that they can't provide those rides for whatever reason. So one of the things that we want to do with the Next Generation Transit Project, and Lisa, can you go to the map slide? You'll see that our entire MRCC region is lit with, has color in it. The yellow is where we are proposing the introduction of something called the Critical Access to Care Ride System, which is intended to be a backup system for the the comprehensive volunteer driver program that we have in existence today to meet that 10% gap if we can. Particularly for Alan mentioned in his earlier remarks that they have seen a rise in oncology and dialysis appointments. That's the kind of ride that is proposed. People that really absolutely need to get to medical care to maintain a quality of life for them. So imagine, so if you're familiar with the CVTC system today, they require a 7-day notice ahead of a ride. What we've talked about initially with the CVTC is when you get to that 48-hour period and a volunteer driver still hasn't volunteered to drive someone, that's where he can refer it back to this critical access to care ride system, where we hope to contract with providers that can get people to those appointments. We're in the process right now of we've developed a request for qualifications for operators document that's under review by a couple of different agencies that we hope to release hopefully in February, and find out if there are people that are interested in providing that, being part of the system that provides the critical access to care. The other part of our system is reimagining the transit that we have in our densest part of our region, in the greater Keene area, which is shown in purple on the map. The shape that you see there is based on an analysis that we did through a study with a transit consultant that identified that looked at ride patterns, but also important destinations and origins in the greater Keene area. And the idea behind this reimagined system is to cover a broader area. Right now, where we have fixed route, which is open to anybody that wants it, fixed route has some limitations in who can use it, right? Because you have to walk to the route. Typically, quarter of a mile to half a mile is considered your coverage area, and it only goes to certain parts in the city. So it's a very limited area that it covers, not useful to the broader metropolitan, if I can call it that, micropolitan region. So this purple spot that you see on the map would actually geographically cover 70% more people and 46% more job destinations. Speaking of jobs, we are also hoping to, with this purple system, to expand hours. Right now, you can't really use the City Express for very easily to get to work. And one of the things that I mentioned, the coordinated plan, when we're ticking off needs, one of the needs we need to tick off is helping employers and helping people get to work that don't have dependable transportation. So by simply changing the hours of service down to starting at 7 a.m. to, let's say, 6 p.m., we can open up the service to a whole lot more people potentially. People that are looking for training too, or getting to educational programs as well. We're also expecting that this will. Lisa mentioned that, again, using the City Express as an example, where they have a 1 hour headway. That this is going to potentially really make riding a lot more convenient. We're anticipating about 5 vehicles roaming in that purple area. You would use an app. We're talking about introducing an app where on demand you can request a ride. And then based on some modeling done with the transit organization, we expect that we're going to attract a lot more people that are interested in using transit that are just walking or biking or just not making trips that maybe they ordinarily would, to 10 to 30 minute wait for a bus or van, and then about a 10 to 30 minute travel depending on where you're going in your zone. So that's kind of the next generation system in a nutshell. I think I'm already out of time and happy to do follow up and answer any additional questions.
All right. So I have a couple of resources, lots and lots of acronyms in this world, and I've linked them here. Also, that coordinating plan is linked here along with some of our past projects. We've come to the end of the content, but we're open to questions. And also, I'd really like to hear from you all what we can change and make better about our next orientation. If you have to run, that's okay. We understand you gave us until 11 o'clock and we appreciate that. But please stick around if you can. Kim.
JB, I was wondering what type of fee is associated for riders that they plan for that?
That's yet to be determined, but in the purple area that we were showing, we're initially talking about $1 a ride. In the yellow area, that's something that we would want to negotiate when we're talking to operators that are interested in providing the service. All of this is going to be subsidized. So the main objective is to keep prices low, to make it accessible to anybody that really needs it. But transportation cost is a function of how much mileage and how efficient your ride is, and obviously all the inputs that go into making that transportation service available. So a lot of it is in the works and will be negotiated with operators that come to the table to provide the services.